The fluorescent lights of Metropolitan General's emergency department cast their familiar harsh glare as Dr. Sarah Chen finished her third consecutive 12-hour shift. Her hands moved with practiced precision, suturing a teenager's lacerated palm while her mind catalogued the 17 other cases she'd handled since dawn. The controlled chaos of the ER had become her second home over the past 8 years, the urgent voices, beeping monitors, and antiseptic smell as familiar as her own heartbeat. "Nice work today, Chen," Dr. Marcus Webb said, appearing beside her workstation. The department head's smile never quite reached his eyes, a trait Sarah had noticed more frequently since she'd started asking uncomfortable questions about certain billing irregularities. "Why don't you grab some dinner? Things are quiet for once." Sarah glanced around the department. Webb was right. Only 2 patients waited in triage, both with minor complaints. Her stomach growled, reminding her she'd survived on vending machine coffee and determination. "Thanks, I could use a break." The hospital cafeteria's Thursday special sat heavy in her stomach as Sarah returned to the ER 20 minutes later. Something tasted off about the chicken, but hospital food was notoriously questionable. She was reviewing discharge papers when the first wave of nausea hit. Her throat began to tighten. Sarah's medical training kicked in immediately, the metallic taste, the spreading flush across her skin, the way her airways seemed to constrict with each breath. "Anaphylaxis. Severe allergic reaction." "Marcus," she called out, her voice already hoarse. Webb stood 30 feet away, discussing something with Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, Sarah's former friend whose loyalty had shifted noticeably since Sarah began questioning their recent procedural choices. "I need epinephrine now." Webb glanced over, his expression unreadable. "What's wrong?" "Allergic reaction," Sarah gasped, stumbling toward the medication cart. Her vision blurred as her blood pressure plummeted. "Severe. Help me." Lisa Rodriguez approached slowly, her dark eyes assessing Sarah with clinical detachment rather than concern. "You look flushed. Maybe you should sit down." "This is anaphylaxis." Sarah's words came out as a wheeze. Her hands shook as she reached for the emergency medication, but her coordination was failing. "Please, epinephrine." Tom Bradley, the nurse manager, emerged from behind the desk. The 3 of them formed a loose circle around Sarah, watching as she struggled to breathe. No urgency, no movement toward help. "We're pretty busy right now, Sarah," Webb said calmly. "Why don't you go lie down in supply closet B? Get some rest, you've been working too hard." Sarah stared at them in disbelief. The ER was nearly empty. 2 minor cases, 3 medical professionals stood before her, watching her die, and claiming they were too busy to help. "I'm going into shock." "You're being dramatic," Lisa said with a dismissive way. "It's probably just anxiety. You haven't been yourself lately." They knew. Sarah realized with crystalline clarity that they knew exactly what was happening to her, and they were choosing to let it happen. Webb actually smiled as he turned away. "Supply closet B, Sarah. Get some rest." Sarah's legs gave out as they walked away, leaving her gasping on the cold linoleum floor. Her throat was closing completely now. The edges of her vision darkened as she crawled toward the supply closet, each breath a monumental effort. She collapsed inside, her body convulsing as oxygen deprivation set in. Through the haze of approaching unconsciousness, she heard their voices in the distance, normal, casual, discussing weekend plans while she died alone in the dark. The last thing Sarah remembered was the supply closet door opening and Miguel, the night janitor, crying out in Spanish before everything went black. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness for 3 days in the ICU, her body fighting the aftermath of severe anaphylactic shock. When she finally surfaced fully, Marcus Webb stood beside her bed with flowers and a concerned expression that would have been convincing if she hadn't retained fragments of memory from that night. "Thank God you're okay," he said, his voice heavy with false relief. "We were so worried when Miguel found you. You collapsed from exhaustion. We've all been pushing too hard lately." Lisa appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of professional concern. "The allergic reaction was mild, but combined with your fatigue, it caused you to faint. We administered epinephrine immediately, of course." Sarah's throat was still raw, her voice barely a whisper. "I remember asking for help." "You were confused," Tom Bradley chimed in, entering with a clipboard. "Anxiety can mimic allergic reaction. We're recommending you take some time off, get your stress levels under control." Their version of events felt wrong, like ill-fitting clothes, but Sarah's memory remained fragmented. The doctors treating her confirmed she'd suffered severe anaphylaxis, requiring emergency intubation and massive doses of epinephrine. Yet her colleagues insisted it had been minor, that they'd handled it properly. It was her brother David who brought the truth to light. As a criminal defense attorney, he'd developed an instinct for lies and cover-ups. Something doesn't add up, Sarah. I'm requesting the security footage. That's not necessary, it's already done. David's expression was grim as he set up his laptop beside her bed. The hospital tried to claim there was a malfunction, but I found the backup server. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Sarah watched herself stumbling through the ER, obviously in distress. She watched herself collapse near the medication cart, reaching desperately for help. And she watched Marcus, Lisa, and Tom standing around her, making no move to assist as she begged for epinephrine. We're pretty busy right now, Sarah. Webb's voice came through tinny but audible. Why don't you go lie down in supply closet? Sarah's blood ran cold as she watched them walk away, leaving her to die. The timestamp showed they'd stood there for 43 seconds, watching her suffer, before casually returning to their conversation about weekend plans. Why? She whispered, though she already knew. David pulled up another file, financial records he'd subpoenaed through his law firm. You've been asking questions about billing irregularities, right? I found what you were looking for. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. Marcus, Lisa, and Tom had been ordering unnecessary procedures, inflating treatment costs and splitting the profits with a network of insurance adjusters. Sarah's investigation had threatened to expose their operation, and their solution had been to eliminate the threat permanently. They'd tried to murder her for money, people she'd trusted, worked alongside, considered friends. They'd watched her suffer and die rather than risk their lucrative fraud. The hospital administration, Sarah asked, in their pocket, your instability is already hospital gossip. They're painting you as a stressed-out doctor who had a breakdown. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling something cold and hard crystallizing in her chest. They'd stolen her life, her career, her trust, and now they were rewriting history to make her the villain. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left her alive. Sarah played her role perfectly over the next 2 months. She returned to work briefly, appearing fragile and defeated, jumping at loud noises and apologizing excessively. She let her appearance slide, dark circles under her eyes, trembling hands, the portrait of a broken woman. Marcus, Lisa, and Tom watched with satisfaction as she submitted her resignation, claiming she couldn't handle the stress anymore. It's for the best, Marcus told the staff meeting, his voice dripping with false sympathy. Dr. Chen needs time to recover from her episode. What they didn't see were the hours Sarah spent in her apartment, researching medical journals, toxicology reports, pharmacology databases. She absorbed everything with the focused intensity that had made her an exceptional physician. If they wanted to play with life and death for profit, she would show them the real stakes of that game. Tom Bradley was her first target. The nurse manager had always been the weakest link, ambitious but stupid, greedy but careless. Sarah spent weeks studying his habits, his routines, his weekend activities. When she learned about his monthly camping trips to Cedar Lake, she saw her opportunity. She joined the hospital's outdoor club, playing the part of someone trying to reconnect with nature after her trauma. It was pathetically easy to insert herself into Tom's camping group. He actually seemed pleased to have the fragile Dr. Chen seeking his guidance. The night she chose was perfect. Remote campsite, no cell service, Tom's tent positioned away from the others. Sarah had prepared meticulous. The compound she'd synthesized was elegant, a modified cardiac glycoside that would mimic the symptoms of acute myocardial infarction while leaving no trace in standard toxicology screens. She found Tom by the lake at dawn, checking his fishing line. He looked up with a friendly smile that died when he saw her expression. Sarah, you look different. I am different, Tom. Her voice was calm, clinical. Do you remember that night in the ER, when you watched me die? His face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. 43 seconds. That's how long you stood there, watching me suffocate. Sarah pulled a small syringe from her jacket. Did you know that anaphylaxis kills through asphyxiation? Your airways close, your blood pressure drops, and you feel yourself drowning on dry land. Tom backed away, stumbling over his tackle box. You're crazy. I helped you that night, the security footage says otherwise. Sarah advanced slowly, professionally. But don't worry. I'm not going to let you suffocate. The injection was quick, precise. Tom barely felt the needle. Sarah checked her watch as she sat beside him on the rocky shore. The compound I just gave you will cause chest pain in approximately 3 minutes, she explained conversationally. Severe crushing sensation, radiating down your left arm. Your heart rate will become irregular, then spike to dangerous levels. Without treatment, you'll experience cardiac arrest within 20 minutes. Tom's eyes widened as the first wave of pain. His hand flew to his chest, face contorting in agony. What did you help me? I'm the only person within 50 miles who knows what's happening to you, Sarah continued, checking his pulse with clinical detachment. The antidote is simple, if administered in time. But here's the interesting part, Tom. I'm going to sit here and watch you suffer, the same way you watched me. Tom fell to his knees, gasping. The pain was written across his face, raw terror replacing his earlier confusion. Please, Sarah, I'm sorry. Are you, or are you just afraid? Sarah tilted her head, studying him like a specimen. You felt nothing when you watched me die. You went home, had dinner, slept peacefully, but now when death is knocking at your door, suddenly you're sorry. I'll confess, tell everyone. Tom's words came in ragged gasps between waves of cardiac pain. Sarah considered this, watching his face turn ashen as his heart struggled against the synthetic toxin. The power was intoxicating, holding another person's life in her hands, watching them experience the helplessness she'd felt. After 18 minutes, she administered the antidote. Tom collapsed, sobbing with relief as his heart rate normalized. Sarah knelt beside him, her voice gentle as a nurse's. If you tell anyone about this conversation, I'll finish what I started, she whispered. And next time there won't be an antidote. When the other campers found them, Sarah was performing CPR on an unconscious Tom Bradley. She was hailed as a hero, the dedicated doctor who'd saved her colleague's life, despite her own recent trauma. Tom, when he regained consciousness, could only stare at her with terrified recognition. That night, as Tom was airlifted to the hospital for observation, Sarah sat by the dying campfire and planned her next move. Lisa Rodriguez had always prided herself on her medical knowledge. It would be interesting to see how she handled a condition that didn't appear in any textbook. The game had begun, and Sarah discovered she was very good at it. Tom Bradley returned to work a week later, hollow-eyed and jumping at shadows. He avoided Sarah completely, but she caught him watching her with barely concealed terror during the brief visit she made to check on everyone after his heart attack. The other staff praised her heroism, but Tom knew the truth. When she smiled at him across the break room, he actually shuddered. Tom seems different since his camping trip, Lisa Rodriguez mentioned to Marcus Webb as they reviewed patient files. Paranoid, keeps asking about security protocols. Marcus grunted dismissively. Cardiac events can cause anxiety, he'll adjust, but Sarah was already moving on to her second target. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, brilliant and ambitious, had always been competitive about her medical knowledge. She'd published papers on rare tropical diseases, built her reputation on diagnosing the impossible. Sarah would give her something truly impossible to diagnose. The Pacific Coast Medical Conference was Lisa's favorite professional event, a chance to network, present research, and indulge in expensive wine. Sarah had registered months ago, back when she was still playing the broken victim. Now she attended as a recovering colleague seeking to rebuild her confidence. Lisa was staying at the Grand Coastal Hotel, Room 1. Sarah had confirmed this through the hospital's shared calendar system. More importantly, Lisa had brought her own bottle of rare vintage wine to share with potential collaborators, a habit Sarah remembered from previous conferences. The compound Sarah had synthesized this time was far more sophisticated than Tom's crude cardiac simulator. This was a designer neurotoxin that would create symptoms resembling a hybrid of Guillain-Barré syndrome and acute intermittent porphyria conditions, so rare that most physicians had never seen them, let alone treated them. Sarah slipped into Lisa's room during the afternoon session on infectious diseases. Hotel keycards were embarrassingly easy to clone, if you knew the right people. She carefully injected the toxin into Lisa's wine bottle using a microsyringe, then waited. The symptoms began during the evening's keynote address. Lisa was sitting in the front row when her fingers started tingling. Within minutes, the sensation spread up her arms. She tried to stand, stumbled, and found her legs weren't responding properly. I need a doctor, Lisa gasped, her voice already slurring. Sarah was the first to reach her naturally. What are you experiencing? Peripheral neuropathy, ascending paralysis, but it's happening too fast. Lisa's medical training was fighting against her terror. This doesn't match any shit. Sarah soothed, checking Lisa's pulse and pupils with practiced concern. Let's get you somewhere quiet. In the hotel's medical suite, Sarah administered IV fluids and monitored Lisa's vitals, while other conference attendees looked on admiringly. The symptoms were progressing exactly as designed: muscle weakness, difficulty swallowing, respiratory distress. The pattern is wrong, Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. Toxin, but what toxin? Sarah leaned close, pretending to adjust Lisa's. Do you remember leaving me to die in that supply closet? Lisa's eyes widened, despite the neurological effects. Sarah, what did you? A custom neurotoxin, Sarah murmured, her voice clinically detached. It mimics several rare conditions simultaneously. No standard treatment exists, because no standard case exists. You're experiencing something that doesn't appear in any textbook. Please, Lisa's breathing was becoming labored. I'm sorry. Are you sorry for betraying me, or sorry you're dying? Sarah asked, continuing her performance of concerned care for the watching medical professionals. Because I was sorry too when I was suffocating in that closet, but you didn't care then. The antidote was administered at the critical moment, hidden within an experimental treatment that Sarah claimed to remember from an obscure case study. Once again, Dr. Sarah Chen was the hero who'd saved a colleague's life through quick thinking and medical expertise. But as Lisa recovered, she whispered something that chilled Sarah to the bone. Marcus knows. He's been watching you. The next morning, Sarah found a note slipped under her hotel room door. We need to talk. Back at the hospital, the atmosphere had shifted. Tom Bradley wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Lisa Rodriguez requested a transfer to another department, and Marcus Webb was asking questions about Sarah's recent activities. Interesting coincidence, Marcus mentioned casually when Sarah visited to check on Lisa's recovery. 2 medical emergencies, involving people who knew about your situation. Tom's heart attack, Lisa's mysterious, neurological episode. Medical emergencies happen, Sarah replied evenly. I'm just glad I was there to help. Yes, you're always there to help lately. Marcus's smile was cold. Very convenient. Sarah realized the game was changing. Tom and Lisa were terrified into submission, but Marcus was different. He was smart enough to see the pattern, confident enough to confront her, and he was dangerous enough to be her greatest challenge yet. That night, Sarah sat in her apartment, staring at the vial of her most potent creation. Marcus Webb had orchestrated her near death, profited from her suffering, and now he was threatening to expose her before she could complete her mission. But Marcus had made one crucial mistake. He'd assumed she was still the same person who'd trusted him, still someone who could be intimidated or manipulated. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The Metropolitan General Hospital Foundation's annual gala was Marcus Webb's crowning moment. As department head, he would deliver the keynote address about excellence in emergency medicine to 200 of the city's medical elite. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah as she watched him from across the ballroom, resplendent in his tuxedo, accepting congratulations for his dedication to patient care. She'd spent 3 weeks perfecting her final creation, a delayed action toxin that would cause rapid liver failure, mimicking acute hepatitis but progressing far faster than any natural condition. The compound was colorless, odorless, and would be completely metabolized within hours, leaving no trace for forensic analysis. Sarah had volunteered to help with catering coordination, another performance of the recovering colleague trying to contribute. It had been laughably easy to add her compound to Marcus's champagne glass during the pre-dinner reception. She'd even toasted him personally. To your health, Marcus, she'd said, clinking glasses while he smiled condescendingly. Thank you, Sarah. I'm glad you're finding ways to move forward. Now, 40 minutes later, Sarah watched from the medical professionals' table as Marcus approached the podium. The toxin would begin affecting him soon, first nausea, then abdominal pain, followed by rapid organ failure. She checked her watch. He had perhaps 20 minutes before collapse, maybe 40 before irreversible damage. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the ballroom's sound system. Tonight we celebrate not just medical excellence, but the sacred trust between physician and patient. Sarah felt a cold satisfaction as she noticed the first beads of sweat on his forehead. The symptoms were beginning. Trust that demands we put patient welfare above all personal considerations. Marcus paused, pressing his hand briefly to his stomach. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. From her table, Sarah could see his discomfort growing. The toxin was designed to create intense abdominal pain first, She wanted him to suffer before the real damage began. Marcus tried to continue his speech, but his voice was becoming strained. Medicine requires sacrifice. He stumbled slightly, gripping the podium for support. The audience stirred uneasily. Marcus Webb was known for his composure, his commanding presence. Seeing him falter was deeply unsettling. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, his face now visibly pale. "I seem to be feeling—" He collapsed. Sarah was on her feet, instantly, rushing toward the stage with practiced urgency. Other physicians followed, but she reached him first, kneeling beside his convulsing form as panic erupted throughout the ballroom. "Clear some space," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. Her hands moved over Marcus with apparent professional concern, checking pulse, pupils, breathing. To the observers, she was the dedicated physician trying to save a colleague. In reality, she was monitoring the toxin's progress. "Marcus," she whispered, leaning close to his ear while appearing to check his airway. "Can you hear me?" His eyes focused on her with tremendous effort. Even through his agony, recognition dawned. "That's right," Sarah said, softly, her voice inaudible to the crowd of concerned physicians surrounding them. "Remember that supply closet, remember watching me die." Marcus tried to speak, but another wave of pain silenced him. His liver was beginning to fail, toxins flooding his bloodstream exactly as Sarah had designed. "The compound I gave you causes acute hepatic necrosis," she continued in the same gentle tone she might use to comfort a patient. "Your liver is dissolving from the inside out. Without immediate treatment, you'll be dead in 30 minutes. Help him," Marcus gasped, each word an effort. "I am helping," Sarah replied, loud enough for others to hear. "Possible toxin exposure, we need to get him to the ER immediately." As paramedics arrived and loaded Marcus onto a stretcher, Sarah maintained her performance. She climbed into the ambulance, still playing the concerned colleague, still monitoring his condition with apparent dedication. In the ambulance privacy, she leaned close again. "Do you want to know the beautiful part, Marcus? I have the antidote, a simple chelating agent that will bind the toxin and save your life. But first, I want you to experience what I felt in that closet, the helplessness, the terror, the knowledge that someone you trusted is watching you die." Marcus's eyes were wide with understanding and fear. He tried to grab her arm, but his coordination was failing as toxins flooded his nervous system. "Please," he whispered. "Sarah, please." "Now you're begging," Sarah observed clinically. "Just like I begged, but you walked away. You left me to die for money." The ambulance screeched into Metropolitan General's emergency bay. As they rushed Marcus into Trauma Room 1, Sarah made her decision. She could let him die, complete her revenge. Let the toxin finish its work. Or she could save him and expose everything. But as they burst through the ER doors, Sarah saw Tom Bradley and Lisa Rodriguez waiting in the hallway. Their faces were masks of terror and guilt. They knew, they'd figured out the pattern, understood what was happening. "Dr. Chen," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "We need to talk. All of us." The three of them, Sarah's tormentors, her would-be murderers, stood facing her in the hallway, while Marcus fought for his life, mere feet away. The moment of truth had arrived. Sarah looked at each of them, then at the trauma room where Marcus was dying from her poison. She held all their lives in her hands now. The question was, what would she do with that power? Sarah stood in the hospital corridor for what felt like an eternity, watching Marcus's vital signs deteriorate on the monitor visible through the trauma room window. Tom and Lisa flanked her, their faces pale with the knowledge of what they'd done and what Sarah had become. "We know it was you," Lisa whispered. "The camping trip, the conference, now this. We know what you're doing. Do you?" Sarah's voice was eerily calm. "Do you know what it feels like to trust someone with your life, only to have them choose money over your survival?" Tom Bradley found his voice shaky and desperate. "We were wrong. God. Sarah, we were so wrong. But this isn't you. You're a healer." "I was a healer," Sarah interrupted, her eyes never leaving Marcus's failing form. "You killed that person in the supply closet. What you see now is what you created." The trauma team was working frantically, but Marcus's liver function was crashing exactly as Sarah had calculated. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, the attending physician, emerged from the room with confusion written across her face. "Sarah, thank God you're here. His presentation doesn't match anything I've seen. Rapid, hepatic failure, but the pattern is all wrong. It's a synthetic hepatotoxin," Sarah said quietly. The words hung in the air like a confession. Dr. Hayes stared at her, then at Tom and Lisa's stricken faces. Understanding dawned slowly, horribly. You poisoned him, Hayes breathed. Yes, Sarah's admission was matter-of-fact, clinical. The same way they poisoned my trust, my career, my life. Sarah, Tom started. Shut up. Sarah's voice cut like a scalpel. You want to know what this is about? 8 months ago, I discovered you three were running an insurance fraud scheme. Unnecessary procedures, inflated billing, kickbacks from equipment suppliers. When I started asking questions, you decided to eliminate the threat. She turned to face them fully, her voice rising so that other staff members began to notice the confrontation. They left me to die from anaphylactic shock in a supply closet, watched me suffocate and walked away because I threatened their profit margin. Then they falsified records to cover it up. Dr. Hayes looked between them, horrified. Other physicians and nurses were gathering, drawn by the commotion. The security footage is all there, Sarah continued, her voice carrying throughout the ER. 43 seconds of watching a colleague die. My brother has copies, the financial records showing the fraud, everything. Marcus's monitor began alarming more urgently. His time was running out. I have the antidote, Sarah announced to the growing crowd. I can save him, but first, I want everyone to know exactly who these people are. Lisa stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. We'll confess, everything. The fraud, what we did to you, we'll tell the truth. Now you want to tell the truth. Sarah laughed bitterly. When your leader is dying, when you're facing exposure. Tom fell to his knees in the hallway, his breakdown complete. I'm sorry, God help me. I'm so sorry. I've been living in hell since that camping trip, knowing what you could do, knowing I deserved it. The crowd was silent, absorbing the magnitude of what they were hearing. Sarah looked around at her former colleagues, people she'd worked alongside for years, saved lives with, trusted. Their faces showed shock, disgust, and something that looked like fear. Marcus flatlined. In that moment Sarah made her choice. She pushed past the trauma team, snatching a preloaded syringe from her jacket, the antidote she'd prepared but hadn't been sure she'd use. Push 2 milligrams of this directly into his central line, she ordered Dr. Hayes. It's a chelating agent that will bind the toxin. Hayes hesitated for only a second before following Sarah's instructions. Within minutes, Marcus's vitals began to stabilize. His liver function, while severely damaged, stopped its catastrophic decline. But as Marcus opened his eyes in the intensive care unit 3 hours later, he found detectives waiting alongside Sarah, Tom and Lisa. The hospital's board of directors sat grim-faced in the corner. The Financial Crimes Division has been investigating the billing irregularities for months, Detective Rodriguez explained. Dr. Chen's evidence provided the final pieces. All three of you are under arrest for fraud, conspiracy and attempted murder. Sarah listened as they read Marcus his rights, feeling strangely empty. The revenge she'd planned so meticulously felt hollow now that it was complete. What about her? Marcus rasped, pointing weakly at Sarah. She poisoned me. She nearly killed all of us. Dr. Chen has agreed to testify against you in exchange for reduced charges, the detective replied. Assault with intent. She'll serve time but considerably less than you three. As they led Tom and Lisa away in handcuffs, Sarah found herself alone with Marcus in his hospital bed. He was going to live though his liver damage would require lifelong medical management. Why? He whispered. Why save me? Sarah looked at him for a long moment. This man who had tried to have her killed, who had stolen her career and nearly her life. Because I'm still a doctor, she said finally, and despite everything you did to me, despite what I became because of you, I couldn't let that part of me die too. 6 months later, Sarah stood outside the courthouse after her sentencing. 18 months in minimum security prison, 5 years probation, permanent loss of her medical license. Marcus had received 12 years for fraud and attempted murder. Tom and Lisa got 8 years each. The scandal had rocked Metropolitan General. The insurance fraud network they'd exposed led to dozens of arrests and significant healthcare reforms. Sarah had become an unlikely whistleblower hero in some circles, a cautionary tale about the corruption of revenge in others. Dr. Jennifer Hayes approached her on the courthouse step. The Patient Advocacy Foundation wants to offer you a position when you're released, investigating medical malpractice, protecting whistleblowers. Interested? Sarah looked up at the sky, feeling sunlight on her face for what might be the last time in months. She thought about the person she'd been before that night in the supply closet, the healer who'd dedicated her life to saving others. Then she thought about who she'd become, someone capable of calculated murder, but also someone who'd exposed a system that had been killing patients for profit. Yes, she said, I think I'd like that. As she walked toward the prison transport, Sarah realized she'd gotten something better than revenge. She'd gotten justice, messy, complicated and costly, but justice nonetheless. The price had been everything she'd once been, but perhaps what she was becoming was more important. The woman who entered that prison was neither the idealistic doctor nor the calculating killer she'd been. She was someone new, forged by betrayal and tempered by choice. And for the first time since that night in the supply closet, Sarah Chen felt like she could breathe again.